My name is Alan. A strange thing happened to me today. I came out of a supermarket with my shopping and was on my way to my car. At that moment, an old man saw me. He came running to me. "Alan, my son, it's so good to see you," he exclaimed. I didn't feel like giving him the time of day. I pretended not to be impressed with him. He kept talking to me. "Alan, don't you recognize me? I'm your father. Do you remember when you were 5 years old when we haven't seen each other since? Do you remember me?" He kept repeating. And then he tried to hug me and hold me against him. I stepped aside and asked him, "Do you need anything? Can I give you some money or buy you some food?" To which the older man across from me made a hard face and said to me, "Alan, what do you take me for? I'm not a vagrant or homeless. I'm a well-to-do man. And anyway, how could you forget I'm your father?" he repeated. "Sorry, dude. My dad's a different person. Right now, he's at our country house building a fire and waiting for me to bring in steaks to grill. I brought everything, even his favorite brand of beer. After the steak, he and I will sit in front of TV and watch a new game. It's a good family tradition we have with him. That man is my real father, and I don't know you," I said as I got in my car. In fact, I recognized him as soon as I saw him, and I remember him perfectly. That was my father, Steve. The last time I saw him was 25 years ago. I was only 5 years old at the time, and I loved my dad very much. One day, my dad came home from work, packed up all his stuff, ruffled my hair, and said, "We're going to live apart now. You don't get upset. Kids, it's going to be okay." After saying that, he left the house. He deceived me then. Nothing good happened in my life after that. It got really bad. After my dad left, my mom literally went crazy. When Dad left, Mom was busy looking for a job. She had no luck in this matter. The time of uncertainty lasted us for a very long time. We had no money. My mom and I didn't go anywhere together. No one went to our house either. Mom was often in a bad mood. She got angry a lot. She and I stood hugging. Then she got a job. She had to work from early morning until late at night, and at night she had come in very tired and angry. She would take it out on me when she was angry. After a while, I forgot what my mom looked like when she wasn't angry. I was afraid to approach her, trying not to ask her anything. And when she came home from work, I, with fear in my heart, began to frantically rearrange things in the house so that she did not bring me once again because of my illness. And that happened a lot. I was 6 years old when I decided to make my own food to please my mom. She was at work at the time. I put a stool in front of the refrigerator and was able to get the last piece of meat out of the freezer. Then I got some vegetables, cut them into chunks, and then sent it all into the oven. It didn't take long before smoke came out of the oven. I realized that my dinner was ready. I turned off the oven and waited for Mom, ready to surprise her with a surprise. Mom came home in really late. I told her that I had made dinner for us, but I was very hungry by then. I really wanted to sit at the table with my mom. I hoped that her mood would improve and she would talk to me like before. But my mom opened the oven, saw my dinner, and immediately yelled at me. "Did you ruin the last remains of our food? Who asked you to touch the food anyway? Now you will have to throw it all away, and you will go hungry for the rest of the week because there is nothing to eat," said my mom, then took out the oven tray and threw all its contents into the trash can. No, the meat and vegetables were not burned. Years later, I realized that I had forgotten to salt and pepper my dish. Otherwise, it was fine. The next morning, when my mom made me take out the trash bucket, I couldn't stand my hunger and tasted a piece of my meat. It was edible. I sat down by the trash can and ate some more vegetables. I didn't understand why my mother didn't like my dinner. I was genuinely perplexed at this point, and cried with resentment. After that, a little time passed, and my mom came home again very angry. That day, she beat me for no reason. I only found out that she had been fired from her job. In general, she often changed jobs. As I later realized, having become as adult, she was in conflict with everyone at that time. She didn't get along with anyone at work. She quarreled with all her bosses, and they responded by firing her from her job without paying for her labor. Mom even did not get along with our neighbors on the landing. At that time, the only person I was close to was Molly, the daughter of our neighbor Sarah. She was a little older than me and already went to school. Molly often saw me sitting on the stairs while my mother angrily threw everything in our apartment. "Are you sad because you feel like no one loves you?" Molly asked me one day. This phrase was so true in my case that instead of answering, I let a tear fall from my eye. Molly figured it out for herself. "Wait here. I'll be right back," she said and ran off to her apartment. A couple minutes ago, she brought me a plush turtle as tall as me. I rejoiced and didn't know what to say to her. "Take him. His name is Chucky. I came up with that name for myself." "Chuka is very kind and loves you," Molly said. "Aren't you sorry to give him to me?" I asked her. "So I'm a big girl. I've got school. I've got my own grown-up things to do. I've got to grow out of my toys," Molly said proudly, then wished me a good evening and went to her apartment. I returned to our apartment after my mom stopped yelling and throwing everything under her arm. Gently opened the door. I saw that she was already asleep. Chico the turtle was quite heavy and clumsy, even though it was made entirely of fabric with a light filler. I dragged her behind me. I was afraid of making a noise and wake my mom, so I tiptoed toward my room. Suddenly, there was a huge rumble. This was what I feared the most. My new friend Turtle accidentally caught the fan wire with his foot, and it fell right into the glass table. The next thing I knew, my mom popped up of her room and was heading in my direction with determined steps. I hugged my new friend toughly and remembered Molly's words that this dude will love and protect me. "What kind of piece of shit did you bring in our house?" my mother said. "This is my new friend. Molly gave it to me. Please don't throw him away," I said and held Turtle tighter to me. "Molly? Isn't that the daughter of that gossipy Sarah from our playground?" "No way. How dare you take something out of the hands of people like that? Or are you saying I don't buy you anything? Surely you must have complained to her that we don't have enough money," my mom asked, pinning me literally in the corner of the room. "I didn't tell them anything," I said with great difficulty, as my mom snatched my new friend out of my hands. Then she took out a pair of scissors from the shelf and cut it into pieces. It pained me to look at the turtle, which was now in separate pieces on the floor. Over the next day, I had to pick it up all over the apartment and cry over every bit of it. I missed my father a lot in those days. In my childish head, I wondered 1,000 times a day why he didn't remember me or come to see us. I wish he would only peek through our door. Then I would hook my legs around him and walk out with him where he would go. I no longer had the strength to live with my own mother, and I was only 7 years old at the time. On one of those gloomy days, for the first time in many years, a visitor came to our inconspicuous apartment. It was a man. I was scared that now this man will punish me too for keeping company with my mom. I didn't even want to look in his direction, but went straight to my room. After a while, someone knocked quietly on the door. My heart raced with fear. I was afraid to open the door, but our guest opened it himself and asked for permission to enter. He was smiling at me for some reason. "My name is John. Hi. Are you Alan, right?" he asked and held out his hand to me. That's how we met him. Let's go to our kitchen. I brought some sweets for you, and you can tell me about the news in your life," John offered. "No, I don't want to go in the kitchen. My mom will be mad," I answered honestly. "How's that? Your mom doesn't seem like a mean person," John said with a smile on his face. "Thank you. I don't need anything. Get out of my room," I said and covered my ears with my two palms. John stayed with me for a while and left my room. From that day on, my mom became less angry, but there was no more love in me for her. I was still afraid of her mood. John came to visit us regularly. Every time he opened the door of my room and asked me to sit at the communal table. I refused each time. One of those days, Mom spoke to me in a calm tone for the first time in years. "Ellen, son, John and I are getting married. I hope you don't mind. I can't spend my life alone because your father left us," Mom said. "I don't know," I answered. I didn't really care what happened next in their lives. I was just afraid that now I might have beaten up by two people. Sometime after this conversation, John moved his things into our apartment and shared a room with my mom. He turned out to be a very talkative person. She and my mom chatted in the kitchen the whole time and didn't pay much attention to me. It was enough for me. One day, John insisted that I also participate in the process of cooking his specialty dinner. I remember my old experience and gladly told him that I could cut vegetables. "All right, here's your vegetables. Here's your knife. Cut them the way you like," John said. I took some paprika fruits and cut them into chunks. And as I was happily finishing the process, my mom suddenly slapped me in the face so that I rolled to the side and hit a low cabinet with souvenirs with my body. My mom's favorite vase was there. I hit it with my hand. It fell and broke. My mom yelled at me for removing the seeds from the paprika first, then cutting it. Immediately, she started accusing me of breaking her favorite vase. I afraid that my mother might hit me again. Immediately grabbed the dustpan and broom and quickly cleaned up the shards of the vase. "Ellen, thank you for the help. You did a great job. We'll call you later when my specialty is ready. You can go to your room," John said in a calm tone. As soon as I walked out the door, John went to the high notes. He asked my mother how often she raised her hands to me. My mother lied to him that this was the first and only time that I was clumsy and sloppy myself. But John didn't believe her. "Ellen is actually a wonderful boy. It was your beatings, that turned him into a nervous cord. I won't let you treat my son like that again." John sat and pounded his feet on the table. I listened to those words outside the door, and tears rolled from my eyes. After that incident, my mother really stopped beating me. Slowly she began to talk to me, but I had no desire to communicate with her. I was living my inner life. I think John even noticed it. "Alan, don't make any plans this weekend. I want to take you fishing. It will be just you and me, Pearly Male Company," he once said. I had no idea what fishing was or how to do it. But with John, 2 days and 2 nights in the wilderness flew by. It was so exciting and thrilling that after that trip, I started looking forward to our next fishing trip. While fishing, he asked me many questions about my life, and I answered them. He was very sensitive with me, explaining a lot of things in words. He asked me not to resent my mother. When a woman has too much on her plate, she gets nervous. You don't think your mother doesn't love you. Sometimes love can look like hate from the outside. When you grow up, you'll understand everything. In the meantime, if there is anything in your life you don't understand, you can ask me, John used to say about my relationship with my mom. After that incident, I gradually began to thaw towards my mother. After 6 months, she and I finally learned to talk calmly. I had to cry a lot of tears alone before I could do that. It was all because of John's influence. One day, early in the morning, John woke me up for school. When I first opened my eyes, he said, Alan, you're going to have more responsibility now because we are going to have a new man joining us soon. We are all going to have our lives changed, he said. I immediately guessed that my mother was pregnant. John happily shared that they were expecting a baby girl. In that instant, my fleeting happiness was over for me. I was sure that my carefree days will soon to be over. John and my mother will turn their attention to their child, and I will be an extra person in their family. I was terrified to start counting the days until a baby girl came into our family. And John was the happiest man in the world. When the time came, my mom went into labor at the clinic. John and I were home alone. By then I was 12 years old, and I was beginning to realize a lot of things. I noticed that the baby girl hadn't been born yet, but my mom and John had already named her Linda. Do you like that name? Or was that your significant other's name? I asked John, just out of interest. He changed his face, thought about it, sat down in his chair, then decided to tell me his story. You're right. It's my late daughter's name. If she were alive, she'd be 12, just like you. I watched you grow and develop and imagine that my daughter will be like you now. The worst part is, I still blame myself for her death, he said. I asked him to tell his story in more detail. He didn't disagree. My first wife Sandy and I were married very young. We were both 18 years old. We didn't even really understand what marriage was or what a family was. A year later, our beautiful daughter was born. 2 years later, I graduated and went to get a job. I was hired at a good place. There were a lot of women and beautiful girls there. Many of them paid attention to me, invited me to parties. Suddenly, I was horrified to find out that I had never talked to a girl in my life except Cindy. That's how I started making new friends. So, she was sure to hear about it. She used to get mad at me when I stayed out so long at parties. She made no secret of the fact that she wanted to go to parties and get it together. But I was deaf to her wishes. With one of my co-workers, our friendship had grown beyond a buddy relationship and into a passionate love affair. No longer interested in wife and my daughter, I tried to spend more time with the new women. Sandy threatened to leave and take our girl, but it didn't work for me. One night, I didn't come home for 3 nights in a row. I disappeared to my friend's house. She convinced me in those days to move in with her. I came home determined to pack my things and leave Sandy. At home, instead of scandal, she greeted me in a calm mood. John, I poured you some fresh juice over there, she said and nodded toward the kitchen table. As I made my way to the table, my daughter was the first to reach for the glass. I managed to take a couple sips. That's when Cindy screamed throughout the house, but it was too late. The very next moment, our daughter was losing her ability to breathe right in our arms. A minute later, she collapsed and her whole face turned blue. When we brought her into the clinic, the doctors told us that our daughter was already dead. Sandy blamed me for everything, even though she herself had put the active drug in the juice for me. It was our daughter who drank it. We both blamed each other until we were finally separated. After that tragedy, for 15 years, I was unable to recover. And then I met your mother. Now I want to build a relationship in a completely different way. John concluded his story. 3 days later, my mom brought Linda home. I held up this mysterious doll with apprehension and didn't know how to behave with her. 6 months later, she became the favorite of the whole family. And 2 years later, each of us wondered how we had lived without her. When I turned 18, I had to move to another city to study. John helped me with the money. When I left, our Linda hugged me toughly and said she would miss me a lot. In parallel with my studies, I tried to work all the time. From every income, I saved my money to make gifts for my loved ones. The thing I wanted most of all was to do something to please John. For his next birthday, I brought him some fishing tackle. He liked my gift very much. On that day, I put aside all my work and came to congratulate John in person. The party was a great success. When the guests went home, John came up to me and handed me a small piece of paper. Ellen, your birth father showed up. He left his phone number. If you want to talk to him, you can call him, he said. I took the piece of paper out of his hands, but I didn't open it. I tore that pieces of the paper into small pieces, threw it in the trash can, and then said, Dad, are you kidding me? I have one father. His name is John. He has been by my side since I was 7 years old. At that moment, I could see tears come into his eyes. We hugged each other. The next day, my whole family walked me back to school. I've called John my dad ever since, and Steve comes across my path from time to time.